Man, oh man, how quickly things can change. If you're a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers organization or you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, like maybe you had an inclination of feeling that you weren't good enough to win it all this year. Maybe you had a feeling that maybe it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. Maybe, just maybe, we're not as good as the record indicates. But Christ almighty, you're talking about a team that got back Big Ben from the elbow injury. So here's your Hall of Fame quarterback coming back into the fold. And with him and the top flight defense, you get off to an 11-0 start. 11-0. Where you're talking about Mike Tomlin potentially being a Coach of the Year candidate. You're talking about the Steelers staring down the barrel of potentially getting home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And can they get, be like a 2015 Broncos type of team where the defense plays at an elite level and shuts everybody else down, and you have the veteran washed up quarterback who has to just kind of stay out of the way and manage things. Maybe you're getting that 5, but 11-0 to go 11-0 to start the year and lose 4 of your last 5 games, that's got to hurt. To go from being the 1 seed to, in the course of a little over a month, ending up backing up all the way to the 3 seed. So you still win the division. It was a tough division in the AFC North this year for sure. They needed every bit of those 12 wins, mind you. But a team to go 11-0 and end up 12-4, not the ideal way to be heading into the playoffs, that's for sure. And it manifested in the wild card round against the old skid marks. We got to call them the Cleveland Browns now. They won a playoff game, for Christ's sakes, on the road. Big Ben looked really bad, like really washed. With that said, like the Browns were kind of playing around a little too much. They let the Steelers hang around too long. But that was an ugly performance for a Steelers team that at one point in time was looking potentially primed in position to have the road to the Super Bowl in the AFC go through Pittsburgh. That they could be the favorites, that they could be the team that unseats the Kansas City Chiefs to, you're losing in the wild card round of the playoffs to the Browns. Yikes. Life will come at you fast sometimes, and it certainly does in the NFL. Again, as the immortal Jerry Glanville used to say, NFL stands for not for long. Now, he would say that in reference to a ref, but it could stand for not for long because you could be doing one thing one moment and it entirely changes the next. So now you go into this offseason looking and saying, what the fuck's going to happen? You've had Marquise Pouncey retire after a long, potentially Hall of Fame-worthy career. You're wondering what's going to happen with Big Ben. Is he going to come back? Should he come back? Do you even want him to come back? What type of level is he going to play at if he does come back in 2021? Like, there are questions here. And maybe questions you didn't expect to be having to ask or get answers for after the start that this team had. But what went wrong for him ultimately? Like, you look at him in terms of offense, this is not the same offense of the Killer Bees with Big Ben and Bell and Brown of several years back. They were last in the league in rushing offense. Their passing game was inconsistent at times. Big Ben finished up with under 4,000 yards passing for the season, where you're talking about a guy that you used to count on 4,000-plus yard passing seasons, could have a 5,000-yard passing season and not even getting there. And admittedly, at the end of the year, he looked washed. Like in that playoff game, he looked done. Doesn't mean he won't come back. Doesn't mean he still can't play a little bit. But man, oh man, if he does come back and play another, you got to worry about just exactly what he has left in the tank and how much you could really count on him and how much you could really trust him to be a big feature part of what you do with your team and with your offense. You got a good rookie season out of Chase Claypool. That's encouraging. But you're probably going to need it because you've got Juju Smith-Schuster's going to be a free agent. Are you going to want to give him big money? He clearly hasn't been the same since Antonio Brown left. I think that's understandable for sure, as he had to switch and he became a number 1 option, and he's not that type of dude. Defensively, they wasted a really good performance from this unit. They were 3rd against the pass, 3rd in total yards allowed. T.J. Watt was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate with 15 sacks. Stephon Tuitt had 11 sacks himself. Bud Dupree had 8 sacks before the injury. So you're talking about in today's game what's important on defense. Can you get after the quarterback and can you cover? And in some ways, if you can get after the quarterback and only have to bring 4, that's more important than anything else you do defensively. And the Steelers could do that. Like they could play some ball on that defensive front. They could get after the quarterback. And it's a waste to have that talent on their defense and only have a wild card game loss to show for it. It absolutely is. But again, it kind of speaks to when you get into the playoffs now, like even when you talk about the Super Bowl, people are going to talk about how great the Bucs' defensive performance was. And it was really, really good. But they won because of their offense. They did not make it to the Super Bowl because of their defense. They made it to the Super Bowl because Tom Brady and that damn offense. Don't be dense about this. They won the Super Bowl because they put up 31 points in 3 quarters. And were this close, literally, maybe even closer, and you could argue Rojo scored, from having 38 points. So even if the Chiefs were better offensively, the Buccaneers scored too many damn points. They just weren't going to be able to keep up. So the offense is the name of the game. The offense is king. So yeah, it's a great luxury to have if you haven't invested way too much to get to that elite defense. It's just not necessary. You want to have a defensive unit, sure, that can get a couple of stops. That's where I look at the Steelers as saying for them in this offseason, like, the good thing is for your defensive unit, you should be able to keep most everybody intact. Like, you have some free agents. You got to make a decision on Bud Dupree and Avery Williamson, Cameron Sutton, but, you know, you still have key players in key positions where you're going to feel like this defensive unit can still be pretty good. So if you can get a little bit more out of that offense, you're thinking that this team could be scarier in 2021, but it might require a little bit of a remake of what they do offensively. And you've got Villanueva as a free agent. You've got Juju's a free agent. James Conner's a free agent. And when I look at this team, I think maybe okay at wide receiver. Maybe you're hoping that some of the guys that they have, like the Claypools and the James Washingtons of the world's Deontay, like they've got enough at wide receiver. They don't have to worry about that so much. But maybe they could really use a number 1. But they definitely need more out of the running game than they've gotten in the past couple of years. And I think that's a top need for them. I don't know if that's the number 1 need, because personally I think quarterback's the number 1 need, meaning that somewhere in this draft they actually need to not just draft a quarterback. You don't need to be burning picks on guys like career backups like Josh Dobbs and Mason Rudolph. No offense to them, but that's what they are. They always were going to be. You need to spend and invest a high draft pick on a guy who can be that dude to back up Big Ben, that can become the heir apparent, that can become the future Big Ben, that can, minus the rates, allegedly, that we could become the franchise quarterback. That's the number 1 goal to me of the program. Like, you could talk about that offense and say, hey, now you got Pouncey, that opens up a hole in the interior of that offensive line, certainly does. You maybe argue you want some depth at offensive tackle, especially if you decide you're not going to bring back Villanueva. But this offense needs some work. But personally, like, I think you got to get serious about trying to find a quarterback now. You've absolutely got to do that. Because if you don't, you're going to be at the very tail end of Big Ben's career. You're not going to win when you have a chance to win, and then things are going to fall apart. You're going to lose your championship window, and then you're still going to be trying to look for your quarterback. Because that's what it comes down to. And, you know, it's crazy. Like, you talk about the Steelers and being one of the marquee premier franchises in the league, and there's no question they are. They have one of the larger fan bases across the country. That is absolutely true. They have been one of the more consistent contending teams over the past decade plus. And that is absolutely true. And you can talk about this organization largely as a whole, that ever since Chuck Noll left in the early 90s and Bill Cowher came in, like, this team has been consistently relevant, a consistent winner more often than not, year after year, with different teams and different styles of play, different approaches defensively, offensively. And again, all of that is absolutely true. But the reality is, yeah, they won a Super Bowl in the 2005 season, and they won a Super Bowl in that 2008 season against Arizona in that classic matchup. But you've had a Hall of Fame quarterback in Big Ben, and those true peak years of his career are wasted. Like, you made it back to the Super Bowl in the 2010 season, but you guys lost to the Packers. You haven't been back to the Super Bowl in a decade. You haven't won a championship in 12 plus years now. Like, that's a waste. So you can sit on the pedestal talking about how great this team is, but the reality, like, if you're somebody like the Bears or the Jets or somebody like that, like, you're an idiotic organization, you're run by idiots, so it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that you're consistently mediocre, consistently crappy. That's one thing, but you expect that. You don't expect a team that's supposed to have great leadership in the organization, which the Steelers do. You're not supposed to expect a team that has talent on both sides of the ball like this team does, with a Hall of Fame quarterback like this team has, to sit there and go out and year after year find ways to gag it up and choke early in the playoffs. And yet they've been doing that year after year. So I'm going to be really fascinated to see if the wheels kind of come off the Steelers in 2021, or they can make a couple of tweaks here and there and maybe identify that quarterback of the future and make one last big gallant run with the way this team is currently constructed.